What is critical thinking? Many people say that critical thinking is a new name for an old discipline. And what is this old discipline that they are talking about? Logic or rational thinking. So critical thinking is logic, or critical thinking is rational thinking. New name, same old dog. Well, there may be some truth to that, because when you say critical thinking, it has something to do with rational, logical thinking. To be a critical thinker, you have to be logical and you have to be rational. But when you say critical thinking, it's more than just being logical and being rational, because critical thinking has something to do with how you apply this logical and rational thinking to life, to certain life situation, to our experiences, including our studies, especially in the graduate school. So it's something to do with applying logical and rational thinking to concrete situations. So in a sense, it is more than logical or rational thinking, because it also considers the practical application to life of critical thinking, especially now that you find yourself in the graduate school. What is the meaning of thinking? There are many things we can associate with thinking. It could be daydreaming or fantasy, or thinking could be remembering or recollecting, memories, for example, analyzing and evaluating things, or evaluating uh, principles or data or facts. It could be planning and decision making. You see, when you look at these items, you go from daydreaming, which is a lower form of thinking, to decision making, which is a more complex mode or type of thinking. But this just to show you that thinking, the nature of thinking is rather complex. It's very wide. There are many things we can put into the meaning of thinking. Now, there are two aspects of thinking we can think about. First, that to think is a process, meaning it is an activity. And by that, we mean there is always a starting point, meaning something that kicks off this activity of thinking, and a progressive sequence that leads to certain ends or results. So there's something that triggers our thought, and then our thought goes through a step sequence, and then it will lead to some results, what we can call thoughts or mental products. Like, for example, we come up with ideas or theories or principles or decisions or plans, whatever. So thinking as a process. The second is we can think of thinking as an ability, meaning a power, a capacity to generate ideas, the capacity to generate thoughts or theories or principles, rules, and other mental products of thoughts. So in general, these are the two aspects of thinking: thinking as a process, thinking as an ability. Now, let's discuss this further. When you think of thinking as a process, there would always be some inputs. So the inputs is the thing that will kick off the process. So what are these inputs? Well, they may be in the form of the different data or information or facts that we gather from our sense perception or from our observations or experiences. Okay? So sense perception, observation, experience provides us with the data, with the input of thinking. We can connect this to our discussion previously about knowledge. That knowledge starts with sense perception, with the perception of certain objects. So this data, the inputs, information, they are then processed by the mind according to certain rules or laws of inference. So you get this input, you get this information, and then the mind now will process these inputs. So if, for example, it's a mathematical data, then you process this mathematical data based on certain rules of mathematics. Okay. So if these are data and your activity is about science, then you process this according to the laws of science, probably laws of physics or whatever. Or if you are in business, then you process this based on the simple rules or the certain rules in the conduct of business. Then, of course, since it is a process, then there will be an end result. So the end result of this processing of the mind would be thoughts. Sometimes you call it the thought contents. So this will be in the form of concepts, of laws, principles, plans, decisions, strategies, etc. That's thought as process. So the end result of this one process of thinking could actually serve as inputs to other mental processes or other thinking. So you come up with this idea. So this idea is an end product of the process of thought, but this idea can actually continue the thought process. So I have this idea. So from the process of thinking, you come up with this idea, and then this idea serves as an input. It kicks off another process so that the process continues. So thought could be a continuous process, okay, of of processing information, processing data, or processing even the other forms. So you come up with the laws, principles, and then these laws and principles becomes the input of yet another process of thought. Okay. Now let's go to the second aspect, which is thinking as an ability. So capacity. And in our previous discussion, we talked about faculties, human faculties, thinking, cognitive faculties. And this is where we can understand thinking as an ability. So when you say thinking as an ability, it is an immanent ability, an immanent activity. By immanent, we mean it is something that is coming from within. It is self-generated. It is self-initiated. It is from within man himself. So it's not energized, it's not powered by something that is external, by something that is outside. And this is how we can differentiate our thinking from the thinking of computers, from the AI, for example, from the artificial intelligence, for example. Yes, the robots, the AI may be more efficient, but it is not something that is immanent because it is powered from the outside. It is initiated from the outside. I don't know if our experts will be able to come up with an AI that is, not powered by an external source. But we as human beings, for example, I'm talking right now, I'm not plugged into some electrical outlet. I'm talking on my own. Can a robot, can an AI, for example, talk on its own or do its processes on its own? I remember the match between Kasparov and Deep Blue. I hope I remember the name of that computer who played chess with Kasparov. And actually, Kasparov was beaten by the computer. If if there was only, a malicious person, a malicious fan of Kasparov, and Kasparov is already losing the match, and then all of a sudden he pulls the plug off of the computer, and then the computer can no longer play. Who is the fault? But, so that's the point. Thinking is an immanent ability. So it emanates from our mental and rational faculty, from our reason or our intellect. Thus, thinking is also defined as an intellectual or rational ability or activity. It's a rational process. It's a rational activity. And with this, we can say that thinking as an ability is the highest function, the highest operation of man, because it is the function of man's highest faculty, which is the rational faculty. Thinking is the highest operation of man. It is, in fact, the operation that sets us apart from the rest of the created world, from the animals. Yes, the animals may have some forms of thinking on their own, but they are not as rational, or they are not rational the way we are rational. Okay? Now, so we can summarize this in this definition. We can probably summarize thinking, our understanding of thinking, this way. It is a rational activity and ability that enables man to generate or produce thoughts or mental images like ideas, principles, theories, laws, formulas, plans of actions, decisions, and other thoughts or mental products. Okay? It enables man to relate, connect these thoughts or concepts into more complex mental products like laws of the land, procedures in sciences, methods of research, strategies in business and economics, and how to apply these mental products or thoughts in reality, in life, and in the society and the world. To see how important thinking is to our human life and to our existence as well. Now, let's connect thinking and knowing, because the two, although they are related, intimately related, in fact, they are different. One consequence or result of thinking is knowing or knowledge. Knowledge is the result of our thinking ability or power. Okay? So, remember our discussion on the nature of cognition or knowing? We come up with conception, with a concept. So, to know is to produce concepts. That is the meaning of knowledge. Now, but not all forms of thinking lead to knowledge. As we have mentioned, daydreaming, fantasy, or maybe even recollection may not directly lead to knowledge. If you daydream the whole day, if you fantasize the whole day, I doubt if that will give you knowledge. Maybe it will give you some form of pleasure or satisfaction, but it will not give you scientific knowledge. Imagination as a form of thinking relies more on the creative power of the mind rather than its critical and analytical power. Now, this imagination can lead us to some forms of knowledge. In fact, the inventors of our days, they rely more on this creative power of the mind, imagination. But of course, imagination alone will not suffice, because you need to combine imagination, this creative power, with the critical and analytical power of the mind in order for us, for the mind, to create something. or to discover or to invent something. So all these uh, aspects of our power, of our mental power, coming together to produce something. The imaginative and creative aspect coming together with the critical and analytical power of the mind. Now, understanding or comprehension and reasoning are those kinds of thinking that leads to knowledge. Okay? So they are related to our reason, to our ability to generate concepts, propositions, and arguments. And for this, we will focus on this rational, okay, on this uh, comprehension kind of thinking that lead to knowledge. So thinking is the process that lets us make a sense out of our perception. It also allows us to put to use what we have learned and to give meaning to our memories, to our experiences, to our observation. So that's how important thinking, again, is to us. Thinking allows us to manipulate objects mentally so that we can solve problems without actually going through any physical motions. Like, for example, you are here, you're planning how to maybe recreate or maybe reconfigure your room or your house or your office. So you're doing this mentally without, physical motions. This thinking is an internal mental activity that can be performed independent of our motor action. And we do that most of the time. Before we do something, we actually do physically something, we try to figure that out in our mind how we are going to do it. Now, types of thinking in problem solving. The psychologists will tell us that there are two kinds of thinking related to problem solving. These are divergent and convergent thinking. In divergent thinking, the mind or the individual thinks of possible solutions to problems. So the person may either recall past solutions or invent new ones, and the individual's thought diverges along a number of different paths or alternatives. So there are many possible things you can do to come up with a solution to your problems. In convergent thinking, on the other hand, the mind or the individual, by applying knowledge and the rules of logic or other mental rules, tries to narrow the possibilities or the solutions to the best alternative, to the best solution. So the mind converges on the most appropriate solution or alternative to be able to come up with the most appropriate solution. So in solving difficult problems, we usually alternate between these two modes of thought. So we come up with divergent thinking, come up with a solution, and then use convergent thinking to zero in on this particular solution. Okay? But when our initial solutions are not appropriate, we set them aside, we discard them, and then we do additional divergent thinking as it is necessary. So to conceive new possibilities, and then do convergent thinking again. To again finally come up with the right solution. So we alternate between divergent, convergent, divergent again, convergent again, divergent again, convergent again, to come up with the right solution to problems. And during this time of pandemic, we have done that. Huh? Convergent, divergent, convergent, divergent to find the solution to this pandemic. And of course, hopefully we will find the cure to this virus. So, divergent thinking is closely associated with creativity and originality, while convergent thinking is connected with critical analysis and evaluation. So the two types of thinking should always go hand in hand for us to be able to solve whatever problems we may encounter in our life or in our work or in our society. Aside from this divergent and convergent thinking, philosophers also talk about the calculative or calculative and meditative types of thinking. This idea was introduced actually by the German philosopher Martin Heidegger. Okay? What is calculative thinking? First, when you say calculative, it is manipulative. You try to manipulate facts, figures, data, no? The experience, the input that you acquire from your experiences. It is purposive, it is goal oriented and methodical. Because there's always a goal and endpoint in calculative thinking. It answers the question how, what, and who, and maybe other similar questions. It is used in the positive sciences, in technology, engineering, commerce, business, economics. So it's more uh, appropriate for these sciences. Okay? That's calculative thinking. So much of the kind of thinking that we do in our day-to-day affairs is calculative. Like for example, in our workplaces, how we can finish this job. In our school, how we can complete the requirements. In politics, how we're going to gain positions, or even in our jobs. There is so much calculative thinking going on in those areas. So most of the time, people are more concerned with earning a living, solving financial problems, earning, meeting the demand of their jobs, or getting a contract, striking a deal, stock market, and so on and so forth. So that's the area of calculative thinking. What about meditative thinking? This is the reflective type of thinking. It's more concerned with values, with morals, with beliefs. So it's different from the calculative, which is rather goal-oriented, purpose-driven, and so on and so forth. It searches for meaning of life, of the world, of reality, of experience, values, morality, etc. So, in the academic disciplines, meditative thinking is commonly used in the humanities, in the arts, in philosophy, in ethics, in theology perhaps. Today, there seems to be a little concern for meditative thinking. So people seldom reflect about their lives, experiences, their values, their morals, meaning of things. And perhaps the significance of this pandemic is that we have more time. Sort of, we are forced to do more meditative thinking. So we are forced to think about our experiences, about our values, about our principles. See? That yes, our job is important, but our health is important. Yes, it's important to go out, but it's more important now to stay with your family. See? More time to meditate. More time to reflect on the meaning of things, on the meaning of our existence. Some people will say this pandemic could be a trick coming from God. He tricked us so that we'll have more time to meditate, to reflect on the meaning of our lives, of our existence. So, generally, on a daily basis, people think more about their jobs than their lives, economic values more than their moral values, purpose rather than meaning. But as I've said, this pandemic is changing the, you know, changing the situation. It's changing the landscape of our lives. So maybe this pandemic is beneficial in a sense because while calculative thinking is important, it's important to balance the two, to spend time to meditation, to reflection. Now, let's go to the other types of thinking, inferential thinking. And that is actually the focus of critical thinking. It's the reasoning or argumentative type of thinking. It searches for reasons, for justifications, for basis, for reason, for rationale. And on a day-to-day affairs, we use much of inferential thinking. See? We always discuss things, and we always use our reason, okay? Our inference when we discuss certain things. Yes, we do the calculative and meditative, but on a daily basis, we also do this. We integrate this into our thinking, into our thoughts. So calculative and meditative thinking should include inferential thinking. Like for example, when we make decisions, we use our reason. And when we discern about our lives, about our experiences, we use reasoning. So in inferential thinking, there are certain rules to follow, depending, of course, on the type of argumentation or discussions that we employ. And through these rules, we are guided so that we arrive at the correct or right decisions or discernment or judgment, the right judgment, especially if you're going to make a very important decision. You have to use reason. Of course, some people, they also rely on their emotions, on their feelings, but we have to balance the two. Now, let's go to critical thinking. So having said that, what is critical thinking? And let's start with the meaning of critical. It comes from the Greek term kritikos, which literally means to question or to analyze. So kritikos, question or analyze. Now, kritikos could mean, or critical could mean inquisitive and analytical thinking, or a profound thinking. It could be discerning and intelligent thinking. So these are all the positive connotation of being critical. We become inquisitive, we analyze, we consider a lot of things, we discern, etc., etc. But it could also have a negative connotation as being fault-finding, flimsy, shrewd, and disapproving type of thinking. So some people, they are very critical in the sense that they always find fault. They criticize in order to put down people, to degrade or to insult people. And that's the negative meaning of being critical. So even the ability to criticize could be used both in the positive and in the negative sense. And some even have used it destructively to tear down the thinking of others, to put down others. Now, let's go to the basic elements of critical thinking. So to answer what is critical thinking, I think it's better to discuss, instead of what is critical thinking, we might as well talk about what are the elements that makes critical thinking. Okay, so I'll start with the first one. The first element is understanding. Critical thinking involves understanding, which means having a grasp of things, a mental comprehension or a comprehension of things, reality, of the many issues at hand, or of a particular subject matter. Now, this understanding includes three elements. One, understanding the context. Two, understanding the opposing views or the opposite view, and understanding the whole range of issues about a particular topic or subject matter. So let's discuss these three elements one by one. First, context. When we say context, it is the framework, the setting, or the frame of reference, the different connections and relationships within which something must be understood and interpreted. So, second, when you say understanding, it includes the opposite side, the opposing views, the opinions or the ideas of others, the contrary ideas. And the third is understanding the whole subject matter, the wide-ranging issues. It means a comprehensive understanding of the opinions or the views involved in the discussion of a subject matter. So when you say framework, we have to understand what is the frame of reference when we use a particular term, for example. Like, for example, when you say mass, what is mass? In order for us to understand the meaning of mass, we have to understand the context. Mass in the context of science, mass in the context of religion, mass in the context of sociology, because the term mass, the concept of mass, will have different meanings depending on the context or the framework that you use. Say, for example, you read the Bible, you read about the creation event. Should we understand it in the context of science? Definitely not, because it's not intended to be a scientific explanation for the beginning or the start of the world. So we need to understand the context, because the context is the key to understanding the meaning of the terms or the concepts of ideas. The second is the opposite views, because it's important to understand not just our own side, but the opposite side. See? The problem is that we understand our point of view, we understand our own ideas, but we don't understand the opinions of others, the contrary ideas. And not just the contrary ideas, we have to understand also the other issues related to a particular topic. Okay? So when you talk, for example, of the vaccine or the virus, there are interconnected issues. In order for us to understand this, we also have to understand the interconnected issues outside of that particular term or outside of that particular context in order for us to have an understanding, at least a working, at least a sufficient, adequate understanding of things. So that's the first element of critical thinking, to be able to understand. Second, thinking for ourselves. Critical thinking means thinking for oneself. So to think critically is to use our own power, our ability to think. Sometimes we think of something or we rely on the thinking of others. We allow others to think for us, or we simply copy the thoughts, the ideas of others. So we have to think, we have to use our own abilities to discern and to evaluate issues. So it means making our own personal assessment and evaluation of the issues at hand and the relevant and related information pertaining to a particular issue. So there's a need to develop the ability of examining the belief system and views which have shaped our young minds when we were young, perhaps, and to see for ourselves whether these belief systems and views are still proper, true, adequate, applicable, or no more. So it's important to always examine our belief system. Of course, it does not mean that one will always end up changing his views and then beliefs when he tries to starts thinking for himself, because he might in fact accept and validate the old beliefs and views by critical thinking. So you have this question about whether it's still correct, proper to follow this particular belief, this particular view. But upon critical thinking, thinking for yourself, you may actually validate that these views or beliefs are still valid, acceptable. So what is important is that if we accept something, then we have validated them using our own mind, using our own reason, and not allow other people to think for us. So we may accept this particular, view, but you accepted that particular view or opinion after thinking of it yourself. Now, thinking proactively, this is the third. What is proactive thinking? Proactive thinking is always creative. We create, we control a situation by causing something to happen instead of responding or reacting to it after it has happened. That's reactive thinking. It's not thinking in advance. A critical thinker thinks in advance. He anticipates what's going to happen and plans ahead, anticipates what's going to happen. Okay? So he's not caught by surprise of anything that may just suddenly happen because, well, he has thought of this a long time ago or way before. So thinking proactively means using our own intelligence, our own knowledge, our abilities in order to anticipate and deal with different situations, with relevant issues, with pressing subject matters. So we don't wait for something to happen, we anticipate, we prepare ahead. So proactive thinking also means getting involved in useful and meaningful endeavor and tasks instead of remaining passive and indifferent. So passivity and indifference are the opposite of proactive thinking and consequently, of course, of critical thinking. So we take initiatives and making decisions instead of waiting passively to be told on what to do or what to think. We commit ourselves to endeavors or tasks at hand instead of giving up when difficulties arise and taking responsibility for the consequences of our actions and decisions. Next, critical thinking as openness of mind. Critical thinking means openness of mind. We cannot be confined to our own ideas alone. We must be open to the ideas and opinions of others. Just come to think of it, we don't have the monopoly of good ideas. See? We need to be open to new views, new interpretations, new perspectives, new concepts. I mentioned in my discussion on St. Thomas that as a thinker, he was, innovative. He's open to new ideas and new interpretations. Now, we need to realize that we don't have the monopoly of the ideas, much less of the good ideas. Because there are also good ideas and thoughts that we can learn from others, from our colleagues, from our friends, from other sources, from our new experiences, from our encounter with other people. We are not omniscient. We don't have the good ideas. Other people may have the better ideas. Next, considering different perspectives. So openness of minds leads us to the next element. We consider different avenues of truth, different possibilities, different perspectives. And being open to this different path to the truth, being open to these new perspective views, doesn't mean that we are going to accept them right away. See, when we consider different avenues, a different path, being open to new ideas, doesn't mean that we automatically believe them, that we automatically accept them. No, we just consider them. Well, this could be a different path. This could be a different path. This could give me a new perspective. But it doesn't mean that without thinking first, you accept them because they are new. No, they are new. Now we have to consider them. Maybe we have to evaluate them. So it does not mean being open. It's like we open the window, and by opening the window, we probably see new things, or probably see the same things. But with a new perspective, we can see it from a different angle. See things from different light. Maybe you've been used to opening windows and you've been used to seeing the same things outside of your window. But when you appreciate, when you try to think of it, this new, this old thing may present something different, something new. You just have to be open to the possibility that it may give you something different. So opening and means welcome them as another interpretation, as another view, or maybe a new source of knowledge. So we don't close our mind to these new ideas, but it doesn't mean that when we encounter new ideas we immediately accept them. We still have to analyze, we still have to assess and evaluate them before we accept them. So we consider these other ideas, this different perspective. A critical thinker is a person who is willing to listen and examine carefully the views of others. Our beliefs represents only one view or perspective. There are definitely other viewpoints that are equally important or probably better than us that need to be taken into consideration in order to have a more complete understanding of a situation or a subject matter or an issue. So we have to, you know, be open-minded regarding this. Now, questioning and challenging beliefs. This critical thinking involves questioning and challenging beliefs. Of course, we already talked about the negative aspect of critical. So there is also the destructive type of questioning, outright opposition or radical opposition. So questioning here becomes a means to contradict a different view without any basis or reason. Constructive questioning, on the other hand, is simply to ask for a clarification or a reconfirmation of the interpretation or idea or insight previously put forward. So we try to seek for a clarification. So that's a constructive type of questioning. So constructive type of questioning means going back to the real issue or the original interpretation, clarify whether such interpretation or ideas or beliefs are right or correct, feasible or acceptable. So the critical thinker must challenge ideas or beliefs if it's really is true or correct. Now, if it is discovered or established after constructive questioning that a particular idea or belief or principle or whatever theory is not correct, or without any basis or reason, meaningless, then the critical thinker is duty bound to oppose and challenge it as to its concreteness, its truth, its value, and significance. So this is the more crucial part of being a critical thinker, because now you challenge the system, you challenge the idea, you challenge the belief. So if we're going to summarize all this, we can say that critical thinking is an active, purposeful, clear, and organized and self-initiated cognitive process. And that's what I like. And as such, it will ultimately result to proper understanding of things in issue, the conception and formulation of clear ideas or concepts, the articulation of true and accurate judgment and decisions, formulation of valid arguments, acceptable justification, and sound reason. And it will lead to the achievement of our goals and purposes. Now, how do we apply now critical thinking in our everyday life? It's common for people, for some people, to rely on their emotion or feelings rather than on their minds in making decisions and evaluations about certain things in life, in their jobs, in the family. And most of the time, they say the heart prevails over reason. Of course, we need to also listen to our heart. We also need to listen to our emotions or feelings. But the value of reason cannot be underestimated. Yes, feelings and emotions are important in our life. But when we discern and make decision, or when we plan our action or engage in a discussion, it is reason that should prevail. In other words, yes, you have to make a balance between the two. But there are moments when crucial decisions are to be made. Reason should prevail. It does not mean that reason prevailing doesn't mean that you ignore the heart or that you ignore your emotion. It simply means that your heart may be guided by reason. Of course, it does not discount the possibility that at some points, in some moments, the heart overpowers reason. And that's very normal. That's why it's very important to discern where and when reason should prevail over the heart or the emotion, or when the heart should prevail over reason. So reason is not only logical, there is a creative aspect that I have already mentioned about the imaginative component of reason. And this we cannot ignore. So the imaginative and the logical, they should always go hand in hand. The creative and the analytical should always go hand in hand in our lives. So through critical thinking or rational reflection, we acquire a clear and objective understanding of the situation and the things that events that happen around us. We become more cognizant of the issues that affect our lives, and we become more prepared and appreciative of the job that we have to do, of our tasks, of our responsibilities, and we are properly guided in the decision that we have to make in our lives, in our daily lives. Now, so aside from that, we need to combine the kinds of thinking that we have mentioned, the divergent and convergent thinking, the logical and the creative, reason and imagination, and even the meditative and calculative thinking. I quote Einstein here. Imagination is more important than knowledge, and knowledge is limited. Imagination encircles the world. So we need to combine the two: creative, the imaginative, the critical, and the logical.